New information continues to come out about the Malaysia Airlines MH17 crash where the plane went down because it was shot down by somebody. This new information that has just recently come out shows that the United States has been acting in bad faith this entire time. It shows that there has been fabricated evidence, admissions by the U.S. State Department that unreliable information is being passed off as fact. Meanwhile, the Russian government gives what little information it does have and has been asking for the U.S. to give more information. At a press conference with Marie Heff, who is the U.S. State Department official, it was revealed that she and her government essentially didn't have any evidence for pro-Russian forces being responsible for the plane being shot down other than social media. Repeatedly, the member of the Associated Press asked for such evidence, but she was not willing to give anything but social media. She just kept saying information is available, but would not specify what that information is. So at this point, it remains that the United States government's premise that the pro-Russian forces are behind the downing of the plane is based entirely about what they found on Twitter and YouTube.
You're willing to present publicly that backs up your version of the story, which may well be the correct version of the story, but all you have, well, it may well be, but I don't know. Because I haven't seen your evidence that shows that the missile was launched from rebel-held territory. But you're saying, so the only thing you're willing to put out publicly is the social media accounts. I mean, the social media.
That's part of it.
Right. But there is social media account that says, that disputes that, or that claims to present a different version. So
what would that version be, Matt?
Well, I don't. There are many theories, but you're saying
most
that all
of which are
those
completely
accounts,
illogical.
Well,
I would point out
all of the accounts that do not support your version of events are wrong, and all of the ones that do support it are right.
Look, we make assessments based on a variety of intelligence and a variety of information, some of which we can talk about publicly, and some of which we can't. And we also, and look, if you just take a step back. Right? We need there to be an investigation so we can get all the facts, period. But on top of that, we have public information, which is, of course, the easiest for us to talk about, of the separatists bragging about having the system, bragging about the attack that took place, and then walking back from it when it became known that it was a passenger jet. I would ask people who don't believe our assessment to say, okay, what other possible explanation could there be for that?
The United States continues to claim that it was pro-Russian forces who downed the plane, yet they don't give any evidence. And in fact, what very little evidence that they've given that says the pro-Russians are responsible isn't even of any reliable quality. It's entirely things that they've just found on the internet. More interesting information has come out. Robert Perry, a member of the Associated Press, says that he has an insider in the U.S. government that is passing him information. And that information says that the U.S. government knows it was the Ukrainian military who shot down the plane. Now, we do remember previously that Vladimir Putin and the Russian military said that there was a U.S. satellite overhead, and that Putin has been calling for the U.S. government to release what data was on that satellite. Now, what he is saying, Robert Perry is saying that his source says they have photos and data that shows that it was actually the Ukrainian military that shot the plane down. Now, here's, according to him, all what was said. What I've been told by one source who has provided accurate information on similar matters in the past is that U.S. intelligence agencies do have detailed satellite images of the likely missile battery that launched the fateful missile, but the battery appears to have been under the control of the Ukrainian government troops dressed in what look like Ukrainian uniforms. The source said CIA analysts were still not ruling out the possibility that troops were actually Eastern Ukrainian rebels in similar uniforms, but the initial assessment was that troops were Ukrainian soldiers. There was also the suggestion that the soldiers involved were undisciplined and possibly drunk, since the imagery shows what looked like beer bottles scattered around the site, the source said. Now, people are reminding everybody that Perry is actually traditionally been a very reliable source for such information. In fact, he had a big hand in the Iran-Contra scandal and the preceding cover-up that had to do with it. In fact, he has been very reliable in intelligence matters like this, for which he has actually won a Pollock Award for. So I do think that coming from him and the credibility that he has, that it's very likely that this is true, and that the United States government does actually have proof that it was the Ukrainian military that took down the plane. Now, a while ago, it was claimed that there was a tape of pro-Russian forces bragging about having shot down the plane. Now, that tape was released to the media, which everybody has just very quietly forgotten about now. Well, the reason is because that tape has now been found, according to experts, to be faked. They say it contains 3 different conversations that were actually spliced together. The tape's second fragment consists of 3 pieces, but it was presented as a single audio recording. However, a spectral and time analysis has showed that the dialogue was cut into pieces and then assembled. Short pauses in the tape are very indicative. The audio file has preserved time marks, which show that the dialogue was assembled from various episodes, the experts said. All of this is very telling. Constantly, the US and NATO media has been constantly propounding the idea that the pro-Russian forces are the ones who shot down this passenger jet. Yet every time they seem to show some kind of evidence for that, it comes back as completely unreliable, something they can't talk about, contradictory to their own story, or entirely fabricated. And I think this says very much about the position that NATO is taking and what is very likely the truth in this entire situation. If pro-Russian forces were actually responsible for this, would they not be in a position to not have to fabricate evidence against them? I think this actually does speak very well to what the intentions of NATO and US imperialism are in this situation. I think these are acts of desperation to try to paint the pro-Russian forces as being bad. Now, of course, I take the anti-imperialist position, and I do recognize that Russia itself is an imperialist force. However, the actions of Russia do undercut the primary imperialist power in the world, which is the United States. So any act that which undermines the power and the imperialist position of the United States is a good thing. However, in this case, we do see that a tremendous amount of innocent people have been murdered by U.S. imperialism and cannot be counted as anything but that. And I think it's very, very likely, if not a fact, that the people on the Malaysia Airlines were killed by the U.S. government, or at least its proxies, the people that were working on their behalf. And all of this attention being paid to the pro-Russian forces inside the country is nothing more than the usual smokescreen to try to cover up the situation. For around the globe, for the last little while, we've been seeing a lot of U.S. power falling apart. Iraq is going to fall any day now. The ISIS are just outside Baghdad right now. Afghanistan is not capturable. Iran is now starting to turn against U.S. influence now that everyone else is now starting to turn their backs on them. U.S. power inside of Southeast Asia is starting to wane a bit. The rise of China is a tremendous threat. Its creation of its own World Bank with several other OECD countries does demonstrate that they are starting to strike out on their own. China's imperialist expansion into Africa well ahead of the United States is also very telling about the state of global power with the U.S. government. And I think this attempt to try to get a hold of Ukraine, to try to demoralize or stop any kind of pro-Russian forces, is indicative of the desperation that they're trying to have to move to now. Already, it's becoming a much more difficult, challenge for them to get a hold of Venezuela. And I believe at this time, Venezuela is just barely being able to hold out. But I think on the whole, this does show the true face of U.S. imperialism and the problems that it is facing around the world, and the depth and the obviousness of the depth of the lies that they have to go to in order to maintain their position of power in the world. Thank you for watching. Please comment and rate the video. If you liked it, hit subscribe or check out some of these other great videos. If you wish, share it on social media. And while you're at it, why don't you follow me on Twitter? And if you got time, go on over to the MRN bookstore and check out some of the latest books available.